Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Well, or good afternoon, good day if you're not local. My name is Sumit Sengupta. I am a cloud solution architect with the One Commercial Partner Organization within Microsoft. My specialty is data and AI platform. So that's, we help our partners develop solutions and move databases to cloud. Today, like Tim said, we're going to have a short 30-minute sessions on different topics presented by both our partner BA and my colleague Bruce Chabot from Microsoft, as well as me giving another talk. We're starting the day with this talk called Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. It's really an extensive, actually one full day workshop that we do. So what we're presenting in half an hour is a really brief and condensed version. If you have any question, feel free to ask in the chat room. And if we have time towards the end of the session, I'll be more than happy to answer your question. So a little bit about myself. I've been about 4 years into Microsoft as a CSA. Prior to that, I've been working in different organizations in different roles. A lot of working in infrastructure and data platform, big data platforms, Intel, MongoDB, Ford Motor Company, Hewlett Packard, etc. were my previous employers. So with that, Tim, you're able to see my screen, right? Just making sure you see my screen.
Yes.
All right, very good. So let's go through it. So we're going to talk about Cloud Adoption Framework. And first thing we will talk is like, what is Cloud Adoption Framework, right? I'm sorry, we'll talk about why do we need a Cloud Adoption Framework? Like, what's the idea? And we'll talk about what it is, how to find out information about this, how you can learn and train on this. Then we'll talk about tools and assets that you can have to learn about this Cloud Adoption Framework. And finally, we'll conclude with some help and resources that you can go and figure out information about yourself, as well as contact partners like Bennett Anderson or Microsoft even directly. So in one word, this is a key slide. If you would like to just remember one word information flow, this one word answer for all of these is that why we're doing Cloud Adoption Framework. Essentially, the answer is digital transformation. I will step through that in the future slides. So what is a digital transformation? If my mouse, there you go. So 76% of CEOs consider digital transformation as their #1 priority. And this came from a PricewaterhouseCoopers CEO survey, okay? There are a number of trends that we see in today's world that's going to transform the business in the next 5 years. And speaking of importance from right to left, urbanization is one. So people moving, more and more people moving to cities, living our villages and countryside, right? Resource scarcity and climate change that we see, destruction of natural habitats, destruction of forest lands, just, greenhouse emission of gases, etc. Shift in global economic power, so political unrest, so some places, some geographic regions becoming more powerful, or, crisis with oils, the wars that we have sometimes. Demographic shifts, we're seeing baby boomer generations retiring, and they have more spending power, some of the younger people, right? So how people spend and where money is spent, all of that is very important. But more importantly is the technological advances that the CEOs see is their #1 priority. And there is no better example of that than right now in the middle of this crisis situation with COVID-19. What we're seeing is that there are a lot of companies, a lot of places, they're rushing to create a virus, and how they're doing it in record-breaking time is one example of how this technological advances were something that we're living and breathing in our life. But a modernization strategy for technology, that drives innovation and that drives growth. So when the CEOs were surveyed, what they found is that 80% of administration costs, this is the total economic impact of moving to Azure, frankly, moving to any cloud for that matter. 80% of administration costs going down because the patching, network setup, firewall configuration, server installation, all this administration work going away essentially in cloud. right? You can spin up a website in literally in minutes. We don't have time to show up in this talk, but obviously if you go to cloud, you spin up a website, application servers or web servers, it doesn't take more than a couple of minutes to do that. You can do analysis in data in cloud in minutes. You can push all your data into cloud and start doing analysis right away without having any worries about limiting your storage or limiting your performance. And the organizations that harness data, the cloud and artificial intelligence, they tend to outperform their peers by about 20x operating margin, and there is a huge additional operating income opportunity of $100 million on that. But this change, there's obviously a lot of good things going to happen with this change if we adopt the cloud, but it's not easy. To be honest, we have seen this with our customers, with our partners, and even to be brutally honest, like we have traveled the same journey within Microsoft itself. The change is difficult. This impacts people, this impacts culture, and it can feel risky. So it requires new way of thinking, disruptive thinking. It requires, quite frankly, organizational leaders to adapt, to take risks, and to learn quickly. And it requires a culture shift, and the culture shift is within the entire organization, assuming the organization is moving to cloud, right? So this is good for anyone who is moving to cloud, who is taking the first journey, and that's why we're talking about it in the very first talk of the day. But there are steps and there are tools and guidelines over here that could be very useful, even for seasoned people. And again, I myself have learned something in this cloud adoption framework, which is less than a year old within Microsoft, the whole process of technologies. So what is a cloud adoption framework? What does it really mean? Well, it's a set of processes, technology, and people that working together that makes a journey to cloud easy and the journey to the cloud manageable. Again, this is not a single tool. This is not just I go up to Azure and spin up a resource. This is not a whole bunch of documentation. This is not a certification. We're talking about the process, technology, and people working together. And this has to be in the right balance. Like, we don't want to go crazy in spinning up resources or spending a lot of money or doing the wrong thing that actually hurts business. Because after all, the whole reason we're doing this is for digital transformation, is for gaining the company more efficiency, saving some costs, gaining some competition benefits perhaps. So in the next few slides, we'll talk about some of the stages of cloud adoption framework. You might be at a different stage. You may not be at the beginning. You might be at a more mature stage, but you can actually learn and you can pick up different things from here. This is a summary slide. So if you really want to take the core message of cloud adoption framework, I would say this slide would be it. The way to read this is kind of left to right, but not exactly sequentially. So what we're doing here is that we're talking about, first we define a strategy, like what we're trying to do, like why do we want to care about cloud? Like what is the motivation? What is the business outcome if we move to cloud? And by the way, when we say move, we're not talking about just migrating applications or databases or systems to cloud. We're also talking about doing some innovations, and we'll talk about that later. Business justification and prioritize project. When we're going to cloud, there is, of course, we are not going to move all in one shot. So you have to make proper priorities that make sense. Maybe adjust the priority in a way that we're going to move certain applications which are quiet, let's say during springtime or summertime, seasonally. So once you do the business strategy done, then the cycle of plan, ready, and adoption starts. Now notice that there is an arrow going around with a dotted line around that. So the idea is that you start with a plan, you get ready, and you adopt cloud. When you do that, after you have adopted cloud, meaning you have either migrated your applications or databases, or you have done something really new, like a brand new application that was never before, we started straight on cloud. You kind of go back in the whole process of planning, because you learn things after adoption that might help in planning for the next project, next application. So this is a going on iteration process. So what's plan? You plan for your digital estate, like what do you have on premise, what resource you have. And I'm not going to read through every single thing, so you're going to get all the slide deck, of course, and you can read through materials and documentation. So I'll share with all the stuff. So what I'm going to highlight is this thing that I highlighted in yellow. It's not that these are more important. I'm just going to talk through a little bit more, a couple of sentences on each one of those items. Skills readiness class. Everything works differently in cloud, right? When you move to cloud, it just doesn't mean that the administration job simply goes away or we don't have to do anything for security. You do. You have administration role, you have a security role. There are roles that you have to play. It just have to do in a different way, right? Between the cloud provider, Microsoft, and you as a client or partner or customer, you share responsibilities in every areas. So that's the planning. Then is getting ready stage, and this is very, very important. Later down the presentation, I will actually share a very useful tool that even if you have gone to cloud in Azure already, it will be very useful for you to learn something about the setup guide, like how you can prepare and get ready to move to cloud. So once you have done all that, you have created what we call a blueprint, which is kind of a governance policy we'll talk about later. Then you have two forks, so you kind of get either approach to go to cloud. Either you migrate, so essentially you're moving and migrating existing workloads to cloud, or you are doing innovations, meaning you're, like I said, you're just creating a brand new applications, brand new systems into the cloud. And again, the cycle goes on, so that a dotted box in the upper half kind of goes on in circles. Underneath all of that, there is a foundation of two things: governance and management, that needs to happen in order for the whole journey to be successful, in order for your migration and move to cloud to be successful. And we'll talk about the governance management and all of this stage little bit details in the next few slides. So governance is like doing a benchmark, finding a best practice, making sure who gets access to resources, making sure you have a policy. Let's say that I'm all my business in Eastern or Central US, so I don't want resources even by mistake to be created in another Azure region, like in Europe or Asia, for example, right? I mean, these are very simple things, but you can simply create a policy or create a blueprint that will help you do that. Management is managing all those resources, managing the business outcomes, the business commitments, the operational baseline, meaning performance, meaning SLA, okay? So in the next slide, we're going to talk about a little bit of each one of those strategies. Again, if I can go back, we saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes. We're going to talk each one of those boxes, each one of those little bit more detail. So define strategy. Why do we want to care about cloud? Why are we moving to cloud? It could be several reasons. I have some in yellow highlighted. It doesn't mean that they're more important or less. It's just going to talk through them. And again, for you, it might be something else that's more important, or maybe something else that we don't have it here. By the way, I have to tell you one thing, that this cloud direction framework, this set of process, technology, the people, the whole idea, this was created in Microsoft by a lot of people. It's not just the people writing code and engineering, creating Azure products. It was created by business people, created by sales people, created by engineering folks. It's literally a product created not only of all of Microsoft, but with a lot of feedback that we heard from customers and partners like you. So some of the driving motivation factors to go to cloud could be my data center is going out, we're getting out of lease for the data center. We've been bought by someone, there's some acquisition, we want to just save some cost. As CEO says we have to go to cloud, right? Or it could be something like, it's not highlighted, geo expansion. So you got a customer in another region, we don't have a data center there, right? Or it could be simply innovation. I just want to spin up this resource, spin up this application in just 2 weeks and see if it works, right? What are the business outcomes? One of the business outcomes you may want to achieve is like time to market provisioning. Naturally, when you spin up resources in cloud, it takes very little time compared to on-premise. So that could be something that you want to achieve. You also want to achieve perhaps some of the business performance. I need my SLA. I need my systems to be up 99.99%. I can't tolerate downtime. My downtime, even for things like backup and operational stuff, needs to be in a specified period, right? All of those things that you are used to doing it on-premise, you can do it in the cloud. You just click of a button. Business justification, that this is a very important point. Cloud is not always cheaper. There are cases, if we go to cloud, make the wrong choices, or take up too much resources, or use resources in an inefficient way, we can actually hurt your pocket, right? It's easy to spin up things in cloud with a credit card, but it could hurt your cost. So how are we managing my cost? How am I managing my resources? What is my goal? How do I make it efficient and optimized that really works for us? And then the strategy will be creep up the first project. Assuming you are new to cloud, obviously, you want to pick up which project do I want to move to cloud. Is it a new application that we're trying to create, or is it something that might be, stuck in a shelf and old SQL or old Windows that probably few people use it. So let's move that, or all the Linux box system, let's move that to cloud. So that's about the strategy section. Let's do a quick time check, about 20 minutes. We've got time. Next up is plan. So cloud adoption plans convert the aspirational goals of this adoption strategy into actions. So digital estate, meaning what resources I have right now on my on-premise data center, right? It's a both quantitative and a qualitative process. Then initial organization alignment. I need to have a team. I need to have people who are doing the business IT. I need to have a team who are doing governance. I need to have even perhaps some vendors, some partners who will help me with that. Skill readiness plan. In simple terms, learning. We need to learn, of course, how this whole thing called cloud works, how different stuff in cloud works. And this is a continuous process. Literally, we are living and breathing it. Cloud, Azure, changing every literally day. And then cloud adoption plan. So we make a plan for perhaps things like infrastructure migration, when I'm how and which VMs I'm going to move. Application innovation, born in cloud new applications, we talk about that. Data-driven innovations, we want to do some analytics, some machine learning, some AI stuff. We don't even need to touch the on-premise servers. We simply load the data in cloud and do from there. And there are 5R strategy, we'll talk about it a little bit later. Rehost, refactor, re-architect, rebuild, replace. Kind of makes sense with the word. Rehost is hosting from on-premise to cloud. Refactor, of course, re-architect, just doing things in a different way. Rebuild, or even sometimes replace with something in cloud. So which of these is my motivation factor to go to cloud? This is the ready phase. This is like before you jump from on-prem or before you start the new application to cloud. Azure Readiness Guide. I'm going to show you a little bit of demo. When I say demo, it's really actually going to a website in Azure portal and showing you how you can use this setup guide for yourself. Then there's a thing called landing zone. So landing zone is if you're migrating, especially you're on-prem to cloud, then where do I land my stuff? I don't have to create all the resources into cloud in the very first place. I can put everything in what we call a landing zone, as the name suggests. It's a drop-in place. And from there, I create my actual infrastructure. I create my actual PaaS services or even SaaS services, whatever we're going to use. It doesn't have to be IaaS, right? So part of the components that's obviously a little bit technical, we're not going to go too deep into this, is network design. How do I design my network? Do I need separate virtual networks? Do I need to have a hybrid network, like network presence in cloud as well as on-premise, some kind of connectivity? Obviously, we need firewall for apps resources, but do we need a front door? Do we need a layer 7 load balancer? Do I need to have people connecting to my resources from all over the world? So essentially, we can put a kind of a load balancer and an application layer for the worldwide, just the same way you access any website like Microsoft.com or Google.com, for example. Designer compute infrastructures. Where do I throw my virtual machines, containers, apps, or serverless stuff we want to do? How do you design your storage? How do your data is designed? Structured versus unstructured, relational versus analytics, big data versus AI and ML data. And then the cost of the landing zone and the blueprint. So blueprints is actually a concept of creating a specific profile that you can apply to your resources. Like I said, I may have a policy that I don't want to create any VM in Europe, or any VM in outside of US, for example, I create a blueprint and apply the blueprint for my subscription. So even if by mistake, I cannot create a resource in the wrong region. That was just one example. So once you're done ready, now you're actually making the journey to cloud. And again, there are two ways you're doing it. One is the, excuse me, migration. So, sorry, let's go this. So assets, evaluate assets. What are my drivers? Like, why am I migrating? Am I just reducing capital expenses, operational expenses? How am I going to define success of the migration? There's got to be some quantitative factors and there's got to be some qualitative factors also, even happiness, satisfaction at the end of the day. Then when you do the migrate, you got to use something called Azure Migration Guide. We're going to show you where this migration guide lives and how it really works. Optimize, secure, and manage, of course, makes sense. You want to have the right performance, right cost, and you have to have security and management for those resources. The other arm, so if you remember, there was two forks in the adoption going to cloud journey. One was the migration. The other one is innovation. So when I'm really innovating new stuff into cloud, right? There are a lot of things to consider. And again, some of this may apply to you. Maybe some of these don't apply to you. One of the things that I highlighted, which is very, very important, most people like to use, for example, resiliency. We're talking about high availability, disaster recovery, right? Even within a region, like within one region, what is my resiliency? What do I want to have something called zonal redundancy? Like within a region, let's say East US, we have multiple zones. Do you want to have some kind of local DR capability or some kind of DR capability across regions to other side of the country or across the continent, for example? Auto scaling, when my business really grows, excuse me, how quickly I want my resources to come up, and I don't want to have any outage or slow performance. Innovation refactoring. So when I have an existing physical bare metal server VM-based applications, how am I changing it? How am I changing it to move it to PaaS, to a serverless model, to a container model, to maybe make it cloud-native applications? This is a big buzzword everyone's talking about. So the idea is that, quite frankly, you can make it that will work in any cloud or even on-premise. That's how your Kubernetes works, right? And then how you implement all of that in your DevOps culture, in your organization. There's going to be learning, there's going to be culture, there's going to be a way of learning, doing things new way, including testing, release, monitoring, management, etc. So the bottom two layers, this is not to say that they're less important or anything. This is more of a foundation. And this also goes in circles. These two, I don't have it in picture here, but I should have drawn like a sort of dotted arrow around this to say that we have governance, meaning business risk, policy and compliance, right? What kind of compliance? I'm in a certain industry, healthcare industry, I need to have certain compliance. So all my resources need to fit into that. What kind of process I want to have, what kind of change control process I do have. Like just because things are in cloud, I can do it in a few clicks or even like a command line shell script doesn't mean that I don't have any change control process within the organization, correct? Cost management, security baseline. So I want to have a cost threshold. I want to make sure that for certain projects, we're not spending more than X amount of money per month, something like that. We're to create a security baseline. This is how we want to manage security for these resources. And again, it doesn't, every single line item may not apply to you, so you can pick what applies and what doesn't apply. And I will show you the documentation page where you can actually go and check these things for yourself. So what is management? So management, these things are so important that I kind of highlighted the whole topic in yellow. So obviously management means who gets access to what resources, right? Do I allow my developers to spin up VMs or create resources? What kind of access they want? And we'll talk about a little bit detail about access later. Monitoring. So how my servers and systems and databases and storage and applications running? What are my SLAs? What are my performance metrics? Am I really meeting my business goals? Oops, sorry. Resiliency, again, talked about high availability, disaster recovery, etc. So how do we implement cloud adoption framework? At this stage, let's see, I'm about 28 minutes, so I guess we can go a few more minutes. I'm going to show you a couple of demo, if I can call it a demo. So let's do this. By the way, this is the Azure portal. I'm assuming most of you have logged on to Azure portal. If you have not, you will at some point. When you go there, there is this thing called Quick Start Center. If you have not used it, by all means, go take it a look. Within the Quick Start Center, we have this thing called Azure Setup Guide. If you click on it, they actually create, so this is the setup guide that we talked about during the planning stage. Before you start, what are the things you have to do? You have to organize your resources, you got to manage access, manage costs, plan for governance, etc., etc. So this is like a step-by-step documentation that will walk you through. There are things like this that even today I see in my customers which doesn't understand how the whole concept of hierarchy within Azure works. So when you log into Azure, for example, use your username and password. You might be a partner, you might be a consultant and working in different places. So your email and password could be associated with different directories. So in my case, this is my Microsoft directory. If I switch my directory, I can show some other directories around there, which some are customers and partners. Once you log on and you pick which directory you would like to go with, you have a thing called management groups. Within the management groups, you have different subscriptions. Subscriptions is where you pay your money, right? Your billing comes at a subscription levels. After the subscriptions, you got resource groups. So resource groups is just a way of allocating different resources within Azure. And the resources themselves are like a physical VM or a database or an application service or a container. So actual thing that you provision within Azure. So this is kind of a hierarchy of resources. Then this will talk about managing access. We talk about governance, like who gets access to what. And there is a scope, so you can control access at a resource level versus resource group versus subscription up the chain. And there is a role-based access, so you can actually assign these roles to anyone with your Active Directory email address. You can have someone who has reader access versus, we don't have it here, contributor access, which pretty much lets you do anything. And owner, of course, has a full control of it. Managing costs. So there is a thing called cost management and billing, which actually, if you see right here on the left-hand side, there is a feature straight in Azure portal itself. You can see your daily cost. You can see where your cost is going. You can actually control it. You can set a limit. You can set an email, and of course, you can stop things where you don't want to be billed for. Governance, security, and compliance in Azure. This is what we talked about a little bit earlier, a thing called blueprint. I can create a blueprint. Like I said, I don't want my VMs to be created in Asia and Europe, for example. Monitoring and reporting. This is very important once you have things in place, of course. What are my monitoring options? These are straight out of Azure, so you don't have to put any agents or anything for that. Azure Monitor, there's a thing called Azure Service Health, Azure Advisory and Security Center. And finally, how do you stay current with all these things? There is blogs, there is resources for you to go back. So this is one of the demo, quote unquote demo, what I wanted to show. The other thing that I really wanted to show is actually there is a documentation website. So you can straight go to docs@microsoft.com and look for Cloud Adoption Framework. And all this thing that we talked about, the strategy, this plan, ready, adoption, govern management, all of that is right here on the documentation page. You can actually literally go to each one of these and again, see which one really applies for you. May not apply for all of that for you, right? So with that, let's go back to slideshow again, and let's check. I'm just about in my mark. I'm just about done with my talk as well. So, oops, no, I don't want to do that. Let's see. Back and talk to all of that. So did a demo, so slideshow from current slide. There you go. So what are my tools and assets? Like if you want to learn something, I would suggest that definitely take a look at the documentation website first. Then there's a thing called landing zone. There's all of these links that you see. You'll get the slide. You can try it yourself. But the landing zone really actually helps you uh, plan for some of these things. One of the example is the decision guide we have for networking, right? I'm not going through all those details. I'm explaining this chart. You can look at it. You can come up with your own chart if you don't like it. But this is like how I'm going to design my network. What kind of connectivity do I need from on-premise to cloud? And this is one example of that what you get in the landing zone. Another landing zone, I'm going to talk about it actually in my later talk today when we talk about database options, like what kind of data platforms I can have in Azure. I don't want to have a whole database, create a machine and install Oracle or SQL or anything like that. So all the options we have, this is actually not all of them, but most of the options we have with relational and transactional databases are listed here. Kind of a rough flow chart. I mean, there are edge cases which make exceptions to this, but this is really helps when we're getting first time to Azure. Migration tools. So when I'm migrating my VMs and resources and databases, what tools do I use to migrate and where do I migrate? Like, what's my target in cloud, right? Again, this is just an example and you may want to come up with your own. So with that, I think, just about 2 more slides. These are different, you'll get the slides, you don't need to take a picture or anything like that. Documentation, the Learn website for learning about Cloud Ocean framework. There's an Architecture Center website. There is a expert MSP for Azure Expert if you'd like to go there. And of course, you can consult Microsoft's own consulting as well. Thank you.